honestly, if you've got an iPhone 16 or 15, you've got a good enough piece to be able to do a basic video podcast. There's so much going on right now. The different ways that you can transfer value is substantially more than it's ever been.
Welcome to the ChargeForward Podcast. My name is Jarrod Wright. I'm the head of marketing for Chargebacks 911. This is a new show, and we've been producing podcasts for a while, but this is the new video interview podcast. We're going to try to do these around once a month. And my first guest, I'm real excited to welcome Tedd Huff. Tedd is the founder of Voalyre, a professional service advisory firm that is focused on global payments and D3 media. Tedd is also the founder and personality behind FinTech Confidential, which is a podcast and other content series that's online that I highly recommend. Tedd, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Jarrod, no worries, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to dive in and see what we can share and help some people out.
Yeah, I'm real excited to get into this conversation today. The main reason I wanted to have Tedd on is because Tedd, as you can see from his lights and his great camera and his great microphone, is very experienced in the podcast area. If you haven't, if you're interested in this media format, definitely check out FinTech Confidential. Why don't you kind of tell me and tell the audience how you got to where you are, how long you've been doing podcasts and media?
Okay. Well, podcasts and media stuff kind of became accidental. I spent so much time sharing what I had learned from every time that I would go to an event, or I would sit down at a networking group, or sit down with someone within the organization I worked at, or with vendors or what have you. And I always found myself sitting down and telling the stories and sharing the stories of what I had learned. I liked sharing that piece of it. And one day someone said to me, Tedd, you really need to start a podcast. Honestly, it took me about a year to finally do it. And what kicked it off is the very first person who was a guest on my first podcast called The Tedd Huff Show. If you want to go see some really, really, really early works of Tedd Huff, you can go find the Tedd Huff Show on Spotify, YouTube, all that fun stuff. But the very first guest was one that interviewed me, and he put me on the spot and he says, when are you starting your podcast? Oh. And so, that whole the public holding my feet to the fire piece of it really got me started. And come around the pandemic time, I made a switch because I'd been doing a lot of internal conversations at the companies that I worked for, and was brought in to do some talks at companies to really talk about technology, partnerships, integrations, collaboration, and the emerging technologies that were coming out. So, Jarrod, I think you heard about this one, but I originally kicked it off as Tedd Talks Payments. Just let that sink in for a second. Tedd Talks Payments. So yes, I did get a fun little letter and a handful of other things from TED conferences asking me to change the name, and thus FinTech Confidential, the network, was born.
I first became familiar with the TED Talks series, and I thought the same thing. I thought, well, that's a pretty clever name, but I don't know if he's going to get away with that.
It worked for about a year and about 300 episodes. And unfortunately, once that all happened, the agreement was that I wouldn't reuse or continue to use those episodes. So I had to start all over from scratch.
So FinTech Confidential, so that it's basically an extension of the TED Talks thing?
Well, what it allowed me to do, what I didn't realize at the time, what it allowed me to do is branch out. Because before I was really focused on payment companies and payment technologies and payment sales, and everything's just around like accepting credit cards, issuing credit cards, doing ACH bank-to-bank transfers, any sort of like stuff just around like you or I or a business making sales and transferring money back and forth. Didn't go very far beyond that. But as soon as I switched over to FinTech Confidential, it opened up this whole sphere for me, because now it was no longer just about payments. It allowed me to talk about anything that was an exchange of value. So that really allowed me to really dive in and learn from my guests about different topics and different things that maybe I hadn't even thought about. Like a perfect example is one of my guests, and you wouldn't think of this as being a fintech, but being able to cash in your unused PTO for cash when you are in a bind, or being able to pay off your student loans with your leftover PTO, things like that. Like you wouldn't think that to be a fintech, but it really is.
So I'm curious, because this is a new venture for us. We've been slowly transitioning as a company to start producing more video and sort of thinking beyond the page. We've been, all in on content marketing in the form of the written word and infographics and things like that. But we're really starting to explore some different avenues here. So I'm curious for you, what would you say? Can you talk about some of the benefits that your business life has had because of your efforts?
Yeah, I mean, really. So let me kind of step back. So you mentioned, you all have been focused on written word and static graphics. I'll be the first one to admit I'm neurodivergent. Like written word and static graphics might as well be an inkblot test. And so for me, that really never jived. So the idea of jumping directly into video and audio was a no-brainer for me. And so that's why I jumped into that, because it also allowed me to express my personality a little bit more. It allowed me to understand other people's personalities. And so like that's why I dove into, like you'll notice all of my podcasts have been video first, all the way going back to 2018.
Yeah, before it was cool, as they say.
And so 2018, I started a video first podcast because that's what resonated with me. And I figured, heck, if people want to read the transcript, cool, I'll put that up on the website. If they're readers and they want to read transcript, fantastic. And you'll notice with my show notes that you see on fintechconfidential.com, they're very detailed, because if you're not a listener or a watcher, at least then you can read to find out what's going on. So that was very intentional for me to do that as well.
Did you ever get recognized at conferences?
The funny part is that I've been in fintech for over 2.5 decades.
Yeah.
And I already had a great network of people I've built. But the funniest part, it's so funny you say this, because at Money 2020 last year was the first time that somebody walked up to me and said, "You're Tedd Huff, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, I've watched you on YouTube." That was the first time that it happened. And I just, honestly, it felt really strange, really strange for that to happen. But then, where was I at? I was in New York for Finovate fall this year. And I'm in the security line, getting ready to go, hop on my plane. And I'm getting ready, and I hear these guys talking behind me. And I hear one guy goes, "Hey, do you know who that guy is? Do you know who that guy is?" And like, I didn't know who he was talking about. Like, I was like, maybe he's like, there's a basketball player or something, like NFL, MLB. And no joke, we get on the other side of where they check your IDs and your tickets and everything, get ready to put the stuff through the scanners. And the guy goes, "You're Tedd Huff, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh man, I've been following you for years and really love what you're doing with the podcast." So yeah, it definitely does happen, but it is the strangest feeling for me, because that was never the purpose of me doing it. The purpose for me doing it, kind of what you're talking about for the business, was really to be able to express into the marketplace the breadth of things that we work on over at Voalyre. So we've that was the whole purpose of it, was really to do that, is really to express what we can do, the types of people that we work with. And you'll see a lot of the guests that come on are partners and or people that we work with in the industry.
So obviously this has been something that's worked for you. If somebody's listening and they're a small business owner, or maybe they run a marketing department, or they're an executive at a larger company, and they've thought about podcasting and stuff, is this something that you think would work for a regular business? Is it worth companies looking into?
So it depends on what your goal is. It can be very good, a medium to be able to, for a company to share use cases and share success stories and share how things are done. But you have to be very, very careful to not turn it into a sales pitch, because as soon as you turn it into a sales pitch, everybody shuts off. It has to be a conversation. The one thing I will say that most companies that dive into this don't realize the level of quality that is needed to be at a company level. If you're an individual, quality is subjective, but as a company, the quality of the audio, the quality of the video that's being shared is a direct reflection of the quality of product you serve. So if your video and audio quality are crap, what's going to happen in most cases subconsciously is your prospects are going to say, well, if they can't get something simple, and by the way, this isn't simple, something as simple as a podcast, right? I can't trust them with my money. I can't trust them with my customers. I can't trust them with those types of things. So the thing I say to nearly every company, and I have a lot of people ask me to help them, and that's why we started DD3 Media, but we can talk about it on a different day or a different time. But you have to really prepare, take the time and really design what you want the outcome to be, not just hop on and shoot bull for an hour or two.
Yeah. But I think that's good advice. So where would you put the threshold for, I guess sort of like how much personality do you need to have?
Oh my gosh.
Where do you need to be with like equipment and lights?
So
I'm asking for a friend.
Well, Jarrod, you can tell your friend that, honestly, if you've got an iPhone 16 or 15 and you've got AirPods and you've got a window that light comes in off of, you've got a good enough piece to be able to do a basic video podcast. And it's super important to talk about video because everybody's like, oh, well, audio, podcast or audio. Did you know that the number one podcast platform is actually YouTube?
No, I didn't know that, but I do appreciate the video podcast. In fact, when I listen to podcasts, a lot of what I listen to is video podcasts. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We started the podcasts that we've done. What we did was we did a series called Blogs on Tape, where basically we would just read our blogs and then we'd put it on the head of the blog.
Painful.
Yeah, but it was painful. But to your point that you were talking about earlier, a lot of people don't like to sit down and read stuff.
Yeah,
I like to learn in the car. I mean, I'm a books on tape kind of guy, or books on CD or audio books, I guess they're called. So we did the Blogs on Tape series. It was pretty successful, but it wasn't successful. It was successful for people that came to the article that just wanted to listen to it. It wasn't, people didn't subscribe to the podcast. And then we started republishing our webinars, and we started to get a little bit more traction. We're still really early days, but I think I agree. I think as a business, you kind of need to be where people are if what you want to do is be part of the conversation. Okay, so now you've talked a little bit about Voalyre, but can you tell me just a little bit about what that company is doing and where you're at, and then maybe kind of do a little bit of the backstory there, how you came to found Voalyre?
Yeah, so Voalyre is an advisory firm, and what we do is we help companies take their financial technology business to the next level. We help financial institutions, institutes, sponsor programs, everything really having to do with money movement, whether it's setting up a sponsor program for a card issuing program, merchant acquiring, any sort of payment, any sort of treasury type services. We act as that conduit between the financial institution and the technology company. And I hate to say this out loud, so that things like what happened with Synapse and Evolve Bank don't happen.
So you said you've been in the payment space for, did you say 2.5 decades?
Yeah.
Something like that. So quite a while. So obviously, Voalyre was not your first
No.
rodeo. So why don't you take me through a little bit of your backstory, kind of give everybody a sense of where your expertise is.
So I'm going to take you way back to the very beginning, and then I'll jump ahead real quick. But the very beginning, I was a designer who'd built a bunch of websites and was going to school for information science and really just trying to figure out all that fun stuff. And I got tapped on the shoulder by a family friend saying, "Hey, this computer stuff, can you please help me out?" And that's all she wrote. I ended up getting sucked into payments, helping people do that. I've gone public with 2 companies. I've worked for many public companies. I've had a handful of startups and had exited out of those successfully, helped companies like Nuvei grow their global footprint, got them into e-commerce. I've helped companies like TSYS and Global Payments and at the payment perspective, but I've also helped a lot of major retailers and partnered with Apple and Google and a whole bunch of different companies over the last 2.5 decades. And we would be here for a really, really long time if we went through everything. But what had happened is I was working with a payment startup, and I'd just taken them as far as I could take them with me being there, and sat down and talked to a couple of people that had asked me, "Hey, can you help me out?" And that's when I officially decided, you know what? I'm going to launch Voalyre. I've got clients that are asking for my help. I've got a company that I can't really help anymore. So it's just time to make this next step. And that's what we did. It's been fantastic ever since. Had been able to work with some really, really cool companies.
Well, that's great. I'm really, I appreciate you taking the time so I can pick your brain, because, you've been all over, as you were just explaining, the payment space. Something I've been noticing, not just in payments, but just in kind of the world, is that there's just like this consolidation of companies. There's these big companies kind of coming in and swallowing up the smaller companies. Is that happening in payments as well? Am I right in assessing that? And what's your experience been? Has that really had an impact on the payment ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing consolidation since the very, very early days. And the funny part is that because I've been on M&A teams and I've been acquired, it's really interesting to look at it, because without that consolidation, the fuel for innovation would not exist.
And how do you mean? Elaborate on that.
So if everybody is working in a job and they have this really great idea, but they don't feel comfortable with taking the risk of leaving that stable income job, then they'll just keep doing the stable income job. There are a lot of really, really smart people who fear failure more than they fear the ability to succeed. And so when you have a company where you have an executive team that has a lot of really good ideas, and they end up selling to a bigger company, they get this huge influx of cash. And so now that thing that they've been thinking about in the back of their head, that just was a silly idea to the big company they were working for, or the company they were working for just didn't align with that mission. Now what they get to do is they get to go, okay, here are all the things that I learned not to do. Guess what? Now I get to actually do it the way that I felt was the right way to do it.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting take on it, right? Sort of like the circle of life.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big motivator too for entrepreneurs if they have the end goal of being acquired. If it's a healthy industry where the bigger companies are making a lot of acquisitions. What are some of the trends in payment technology that you think businesses should be paying attention to?
Oh, man. There's so much going on right now. Right at this moment, not even just US, but globally, the different ways that you can transfer value is substantially more than it's ever been. It's like I've never seen so many different ways to transfer value. Cross-border has become easier. It's not easy, but it is easier. We're seeing choice and options within each geographic region expanding. I'll just use the US. I mean, we had credit card, we had ACH, we had wire. Then we got the option to do Zelle from our banks. We got Venmo, and then we got Cash App. Oh, and don't forget, the clearinghouse launched RTP. Oh, and then just last year, FedNow launched a real-time direct payment rail. So, and then I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact of we've got different types of cryptocurrency, whether it's a traditional coin or a stable coin. Those are in the mix as well now. So now we just have a plethora of different payment tools to choose from. And as a business owner, circling back around, as a business owner, you have to look at who your customers are and determine which ones match them the best. Don't try and do it all. And when I say that, it's so funny because I can picture a very specific website, which will remain nameless, that I tried to buy something from, and it was half a page of different payment options.
Of different buttons right underneath.
Yeah, different buttons.
Yeah.
Different buttons, all under the bottom.
Yeah. That's really good advice. We do a pair of studies, the field report and the cardholder index, and they're very similar studies, but one we talk to cardholders and the other one we talk to merchants. And one of the more interesting things from that study is when you get into alternative payments, because if you overlay the cardholder preference with the options that the merchants are offering, it's like a 1-to-1, right? It's different numbers, but it's ranked choice all the way down. So merchants are definitely paying attention to the payment methods that their cardholders are starting to use. Is ACH I'm sort of throwing this out there, but I hear a lot of ACH and the history of ACH that I'm familiar with is go find one of your checks and you got to write canceled on it, and it was sort of this really cumbersome process. But I'm starting to understand that it's maybe a little bit leaner now. Has it evolved more, or has basically peer-to-peer sort of taken the place of like a newer form of ACH?
No, so ACH volume just continues to grow. The amount of ACH continues to grow because of companies like Plaid that have made it very easy to connect your banking information to a business. That has helped out tremendously. And there are multiple other companies that offer that service too. So it's not just Plaid. So just do your due diligence to find the one that fits you best. But there are a bunch of different options out there that allow you to streamline that process. And the part that I like about that is it puts the consumer in control. The consumer is the one that is giving you that data. The consumer is doing all those different pieces. So the consumer has the control point at that piece. So I think that is really, really good. But the funny part, the part that I find really interesting is that one of my partners, a company called Check Alt, they did a whole bunch of surveys, and they are in one of the businesses they do is helping people manage paper checks. And there's still billions of dollars in paper checks out in the world here in the US. But they've come up with some really cool technology that really simplifies it and makes it safer, because the number one vector of attack for paper checks, believe it or not, is the US Postal Service.
How do you
Getting
mean?
lost, getting stolen. That is the number one place that it typically fails. And you don't really think about that, right? So then like check fraud still happens a lot. Lots of fake checks. And we've come a long way, but there's still a ton of check fraud going on.
All right. So you heard it here from Tedd Huff. The future is paper checks.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it'd be future as paper checks, but I don't see him going. The death of paper checks has been well overly exaggerated. But they are, a lot of that is moving over to ACH, or it's moving over to push payment. We're seeing a lot of that move over to RTP and FedNow. So there's just a lot of movement going on, and that's basically kind of what I had mentioned earlier.
Completely at the other end of paper checks. How do you feel about crypto? Where are you on that? Judging by your beard, I assume you're a crypto maximalist. Are you?
Wow, the beard
what do you
gave it
think?
away, did it? No, I look at crypto as being a fantastic tool. It has its uses. It has its place. It's a fantastic tool. It allows us to do things that you can't do with the legacy fiat financial systems. The ability to decentralize is another great piece of it. The amount of data is fantastic. The automation that can be brought with it. There's just so much that can be done that is so far beyond what we're even thinking today. And so I see that continuing to grow, and our perception of how it can and should be used completely changing over the next 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years. Okay. Because they've been promising, the cryptocurrency's been real successful at store of value and investment mechanism. It's been, I know that you talked a little bit about cross-border payments, but like the other stuff, the contracts, the immediate payment, a lot of that stuff, like none of it ever really materialized. It hasn't picked up adoption or anything like that. So I mean, specifically, like what are you looking for, like what do you think maybe might be the biggest next thing that people realize and people start getting used to cryptocurrency doing in their lives?
This is a discussion I'm having a lot lately, and I'm having a lot with financial institutions and technology companies. And when you have your traditional fiat-based assets sitting in the same place as your digital assets, we're in the same place and you can interchange them back and forth, and you can leverage them the same way, and you can see them the same way and everything. And you have that ability to see it all in one place. That's when you're going to start to see a lot of these different things come in play. And also remember that we're talking about a lot of governmental regulatory environment. You're talking about governmental policies. You're talking about a number of different things that the places where the biggest benefits of the smart contract really lie. We have to wait. There's so much regulation in place. And there has been in my opinion, an excessive amount of enforcement of ideas of what the regulation should be around crypto, around any sort of cryptocurrency type product, that it set us back 10 years. It really set us back about 10 years. And now we're getting to a place where the environment, we've learned what is the perspective. We've learned of how to handle a number of different things. And so you're going to see, and you've seen it just in the last few months, the start to uptick off of it, because all of the things that everybody got enforcement actions on have now everybody's been able to retool and start to pull off of. So that's a short version. This is like a hole that I could go down deep in for a while, but we're spending a lot of time really looking at not the Bitcoin per se as an investment, but more of how do we leverage a stable coin environment to enable cross-platform, cross-country, cross-border, cross-currency, cross-everything, real-time movement of value. And that's the key thing. It's value, and be able to do that based upon rules that have been set, or the contracts, smart contracts, as you mentioned.
So the stable coin thing, I'm not paying super close attention to this, but while I have you here, I just, since you seem like you are, the stable coin, the last I heard, the stable coin, there was some sort of bad press around that. Didn't a few of the big ones fail? Or, I mean, is a stable coin even a real thing, or is it sort of like it's
there's
stable
different
until
kinds.
it's not type of thing?
Well, I mean, Circle is the largest stable coin, USDC, which is Circle stable coin here in the US, that is licensed and all that fun stuff here in the US. Got these pieces, but the stable coin isn't just these centralized stable coins. JP Morgan has their own stable coin already that they're using to transfer back and forth through intra-office movement. And they're tying things onto it, like contracts of a bill of lading for shipment of goods. So the funds don't move until they get notification of the shipment being sent. So there are lots of little things that can go on that are already being used across a number of financial institutions that maybe aren't public facing. And that's one thing, is I think you're going to see that the stablecoin, maybe it will make it into the public consumption. But the one thing that I always say is it's got to be as easy as swiping a credit card.
Right.
It's got to be as easy as swiping a credit card to use crypto. And we'll get there. But there's just a lot of work to do, but we're going to see it more on the institutional side first.
So, we're recording this at the beginning of January. And so I feel like I'm obligated to ask, do you have what are your big 2025 predictions? What are you looking for?
Oh, well, I mean, we've kind of hit on them, but let me just kind of circle back through. I think the change in administration is going to create an open opportunity for a lot of innovation, a lot of forward movement to happen really within the first half of the year. So you're going to see a lot of movement happen around places that people felt scared to move into. As you're seeing the rates continue to get cut, so you're going to see more free flow of money happening, which means you're going to see more investments. And we've already seen a number of investments really start to move towards the stablecoin and blockchain space, but it's not always going to be there. We're going to start to see some of, AKA the boring business types, get a lot of innovation, a lot of budget for innovation. And I think you're going to see a lot of that stuff happen too. It's just, this year is going to be full of change. There's going to be a lot of, just trying to think of the right word to use, but this year it's going to be full of change, and you're going to see a lot of investment go in places that haven't seen investment in a long time.
Just unrelated topic. You think TikTok's going to be gone? It's a couple of days, right?
Well, I mean, we're recording this on January 16th, and everything points towards that happening. And what we've seen and what I've heard from some other media folks is the movement off of TikTok has already happened mostly.
Yeah, everybody's signing up. I would imagine that most people that were super active on TikTok probably also had Instagram and Facebook and all those different platforms as well.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna see that happen. When you're talking business to consumer, that you're gonna see a lot of that happen. But we've already started to see an influx of media coming onto LinkedIn for business to business. And that's been a really interesting thing to see happen as well. I mean, X has pretty much dwindled down to, I'm going to call it negative news. It's dwindled down to mostly like what are all the doomsday type items. There are a handful of good conversations on there, but not what it used to be.
Yeah.
So we've seen an uptick in Blue Sky where people have moved over there. The threads for Instagram have picked up a bit, but realistically, I think the biggest winners right now have been Instagram and LinkedIn have got the biggest lift out of even the discussions of how far we've gotten with the TikTok ban.
Yeah, I think I mostly see your stuff. I see your clips on LinkedIn, and then I see your videos on YouTube. Is that so? You're on all of the platforms, all the social media stuff. You're doing everything.
Yeah. So we're across all platforms right now. It's really fun because we engage with, although our content is very similar, the type of individuals that we engage with are completely different. It's completely different depending on where we're at. And how they want to engage is so different.
So do you, I assume you don't go and post everything. Are you using like a Hootsuite, or how are you managing posting all those different places?
So you're going to laugh. We do not use a third-party tool. We do everything natively. And the reason why we do everything natively is we ran a whole bunch of data. We did the analytics on it. And what we were finding is that anytime that we ran out of a posting suite, we either, one, couldn't use some of the coolest native functions to increase engagement from those platforms, or two, just the content we were posting didn't get the engagement. But as soon as we got off of using a consolidated platform and started logging into each one of these, the reach and engagement, the organic reach and engagement increased massively.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think I've had some of the same experience. I think my preference personally is to post individually, but just as a business, it isn't for us. We go to a centralized place and just sort of schedule it out. And it's really not even for the time saving. It's just for the ability to schedule, because sometimes we'll have a group of articles that we publish, and we want to sort of trickle those out.
Yeah, because we create a content calendar way ahead of time. So our content is predetermined. We do it in about 6-month chunks, and we get all that together, and we identify what we're going to post on, when we're going to post it, when we're going to release an episode, when we're not going to release an episode. Now, mind you, there are a lot of times where things happen. And this is the one thing, if you're doing a podcast, you want to get consistent. You'll want to plan for these things where you get a request for takedown of an episode because of something. So you may have to pull something down, or you may find out that if you're doing an interview show, maybe the person you interviewed just left the company.
Yeah.
And so you have to scramble. Perfect example is that we were getting ready to release an episode this Monday, found out that the person that was interviewed is no longer with the company, and it was not their choice to leave. So the company reached out, and as a good steward to the industry, we went ahead and pulled it down. So now we have a week where we don't have content out there because I did a bad job of planning ahead to have content already ready 2 weeks in advance.
Yeah. To have a queue, but you have guests, you have everything kind of lined up for 6 months ahead.
Yeah, we've got guests scheduled and or recorded to get us 6 months out.
Okay. And then how often are you guys publishing?
Weekly,
Weekly. Okay.
unless something like this happens.
Right. Well, great. So one of the pieces of advice that you gave me, just to give everybody a sort of look behind the curtain here, is you gave me you talked about the importance of having a structure to a podcast. So in James Lipton style, I came up with some questions that I'm going to ask you, and that may be part of how I end all of my podcasts. So sort of rapid fire, we'll just kind of go through them. You can elaborate if you want. But the first question I think I want to ask all guests is crypto or cash?
Crypto.
Okay. Sailboat or RV?
RV.
Okay. This one's a little bit headier. In 10 years, will AI have a net positive or a net negative impact on society?
Both are true.
Well, I know, but I'm saying net. So you take all the positive, you take all the negative, they cancel out. What are you left with? Are you glad in 10 years that AI is here?
I think overarching in 10 years, we're going to be happy that we've identified a way to leverage what we're calling artificial intelligence.
What's the best business advice you ever received?
Trying to think of how to shorten this because it's a little bit long. The quickest way to make something take longer is to take a shortcut.
Perfect. We'll leave that there. All right. And then finally, what's your favorite safe for work one-liner joke?
Oh, one-liner joke. Oh, one-liner joke. Man, I really suck with jokes. I really, really do. I really wanted to say, why does a chicken cross the road? And, that really, really bad one.
To get to the other side.
Exactly.
It's not one of the newer iterations.
Yeah, no, I'm not that fancy. Like, I love watching comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But those jokes are not safe for work. So,
all right. What is it? Why did the chicken cross the road? That'll go down. That's going to be your official answer. All right. So if somebody wanted to check out FinTech Confidential or wanted to talk to you about some of the services at Voalyre, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, if they want to engage and learn about all the secrets behind FinTech and the people that are making it happen, as we call it, the people, the tech, and the companies that are changing the way we pay and get paid, you can do that by going to fintechconfidential.com. And you can subscribe there to be notified whenever. You can also directly access the videos and the audio feed directly from there. If you want to find out how Voalyre can help your company do better in FinTech and move forward, you can just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, Tedd Huff, 2 Ds, 2 Fs, so TEDDHUFF. And you can find it. Just send me a message and we'll schedule a time to work together.
All right, Tedd, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was a good conversation, a good first show.
No, I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Jarrod.
All right.